So continuing on with our lessons on adolescent growth and development, this morning I'm going to be talking about how growth and development impacts student learning. There are some things that we as Job Corps staff, whether we are actual academic teachers, vocational instructors, any staff member who is working with a student, we need to remember that this is a training program. They are here learning. So to some degree, everyone has a responsibility to teach our students. So with adolescent growth and development, the changes that are taking place in their body, the changes that are taking place in their brain, there are some things that we do need to consider when we are working with our students, whether it is in a training capacity, a counseling capacity, or just our day-to-day interactions with our student body. Now, Christy mentioned earlier that there seems to be several schools of thought as far as what the age groups or the total age group in which adolescence takes place. General consensus is that it can be divided up into 3 specific groups. This particular one tends to take a little bit more broad approach to adolescence, looking at early adolescence between ages 10 and 14. Right around 14, 15, students will enter into middle adolescence. And then around 17 or 18, they will transition into late adolescence and early adulthood. So before we talk about the implications for learning, let's take a moment and think about what adolescence is and help us gain a better understanding of the processes that are taking place, the changes that our students maybe are going through on the tail end of development, or very well could be just kind of on that borderline of middle adolescence. So first, we need to remember that adolescence is not an event. Adolescence is a process. It is a stage, a period of growth in human beings. As a matter of fact, it is by far one of the most important stages of development for human beings. Oftentimes when we hear the term adolescent, the first thing that comes to mind is what age group? Teenagers. As soon as we hear the word teenagers, we automatically start thinking about specific things that we associate with teenagers. Specific attitudes, specific ways that they do things, certain types of behaviors. As a matter of fact, as I was going through preparing to do the presentation on the impact on student learning, I couldn't help but see my very own teenage daughter as I was reading about some of the information that we're going to be talking about today. And I'll be honest with you, it's stuff that I never thought about before, and actually made me feel kind of guilty about some of the things that I was trying to do as a parent. Some of the expectations that I was putting on her, because I failed to take that moment and think, this is a rapid period of change for her. Maybe I need to be a little bit more understanding. So during this phase, or during this stage of development, they are going through, it seems like, rapid, almost overnight changes, not just in their physical bodies, but in their mind as well. So adolescence is a period of change to the physical, neurological, cognitive, and socio-emotional development. So let's begin with just a very brief overview of the biology of adolescence. Of course, traditionally, when we think of when does adolescence begin, what do we call that stage or that period?
Preteen.
Preteen. And what do preteens start going through? Puberty. Now, when we think of puberty, what are some of the things that come to mind? What do we experience? Yep.
Yeah. A lot of emotions.
Your boys get really hairy.
Yes.
My son got really hairy really quick.
We start noticing, first of all, physical changes. Okay? Like Tracy said, boys start getting hairy, some of them more than others. I remember seeing some students, and I know a running joke now. Matter of fact, it was Mr. Sierra's wife went to a Unaka High School football game, and she was thoroughly impressed with how many of their freshman ball players, their football players, their entire offensive line had full beards. I couldn't even get more than a few hairs until after I graduated from high school. But during that period of adolescence, we start seeing the physical changes take place. Hair, you know, Brian mentioned the Board of Education being applied to the seat of learning, and there are reasons why that would occur. But we also need to consider that the reason why there isn't a true consensus on when adolescence begins or how long this period of growth and development takes is because there's some people who maybe are late bloomers. You might have others who seem like they're already starting to grow facial hair. They're already starting to go through maybe some of the psychological and emotional as well as the physical changes at a much earlier age. Here, within the last couple of weeks, I don't get on social media as much anymore, but did anybody see the post about the 12-year-old football player that had a mustache and a goatee? And people were firing back on social media. There's no way he's 12, 17, 18 maybe, but there is no way that he is 12, and sure enough, he is. There is no hard line on what exactly the hard date, time, hour, however you want to put it, on when the biological changes start taking place. Studies show that the timing and really the course, the length of time of adolescent development is affected not only by biology, but it's affected by the environment in which they live as well as their experiences. Also during puberty, it is a critical stage of brain development. So the hypothalamus, our control center for involuntary body responses, starts signaling the release of hormones. And these hormones are what begin to trigger the various biological, physical changes that we go through. However, there are studies that are showing that the hormones actually influence some of the structural as well as the functional brain development. So it's not just the external physical characteristics that we see changing during puberty, but there's also some changes that are occurring to the brain. Now, who can tell me when the fastest and most significant changes to the brain occur throughout human development?
Fetus?
Yeah, maybe.
You're close.
Between 0 and 1?
A little bit higher, but yeah.
Not 1?
3?
Yes. Between the ages of birth and 3 years old. That is the first major period of what is called brain plasticity. And what that refers to is the brain's ability to adapt and change as a result of the individual's experiences and their environment. Now, puberty marks the second period of brain plasticity. So there's significant changes that take place when all kids are, real itty bitty and cute and sweet. Things kind of level out, and then they hit another rapid onset of changes with puberty. Some of the key changes that we see in the brain occur during adolescence. First of all, there's an increased capacity for complex mental tasks. So they're capable of doing more problem solving. Their brains are very active. We start to see improved specialization of various regions of the brain. As a result, they experience an enhancement of the overall function of the brain. And Christy mentioned this morning the period of brain development where the neurological pruning starts taking place. So those neuron connectors, those pathways that don't function as much, the brain just kind of goes through and gets rid of them, prunes them. There's no need for them. The idea behind that is to improve the overall efficiency of the brain. During puberty, adolescents tend to be more sensitive to the influences from their environment as well as from their own personal experiences. As part of cognitive development, we see that adolescents are capable of more advanced cognition. In other words, they're capable of completing more complex cognitive tasks. And one key example are the executive functions. You can see the list up here. Executive functions include abstract thought, planning, decision-making, perspective taking, or being able to see from another point of view, as well as future thinking, being able to look towards the future. Now, you're probably hearing this and saying, I don't see any of this going on with my teenager. I never saw that with my teenager. I don't see any of this going on with our students who are in those later stages of development. What's the key word up here, though?
Capable?
Capable. It means that during this time they are capable of more complex cognitive tasks. So let's be realistic. How many of our students have actually had the opportunity to exercise these?
Not a lot.
If adolescent development is also influenced by environment and experience, how many times do we maybe have students who are in that late adolescent stage that tend to act more like students who are developing in early adolescence? If we keep that in consideration, working with our students and understanding kind of what's going on in their heads makes a lot more sense. If environment and experiences can have an impact on when they biologically start going through these changes, then maybe the reason why we have Johnny coming into your office and breaking down in tears because he doesn't understand why his flight got canceled. You start to think, maybe that's why he's acting this way. Maybe that is why he does what he does. In addition, adolescents start to develop social cognition, and this specifically refers to their awareness, the way that they interpret, and how they judge social behaviors. In addition, they're capable of advanced cognition, which means that they have an improved ability to process and regulate emotions. So again, we may look at this and think, I don't see it. But the key word is capable. They have the natural ability, they have the tools available to them to do these things. They're just at an age and at a stage of development that they don't know how to. They might have the car, but they don't know how to drive it. Some signs of change that we see within the 3 stages of development. In early adolescence, they tend to have more personalized communication. They're at that age where they feel like that they can do it themselves, that they can make decisions on their own. Their focus tends to shift to more personal decisions. They start coming to the realization that, you know what? Parental authority is not the law. It is not absolute. It's not the end all, be all. They also start those wonderful questions that we hate to hear as parents or as educators. Why? How come? They begin to question authority. They don't just accept the rules as they stand. They go through this period of wanting to know why these rules are in place. By the time they get to middle adolescence, they're questioning authority even more extensively. And as a matter of fact, they get to a point where they literally start questioning everything. The reason why they're doing this is because they're beginning to see that issues that authority figures can rightly regulate, they're trying to figure out how well they line up with issues that they perceive are personal choices. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I'm 15, 16 years old. I can make decisions on my own. I can do things myself. I am the master of my own destiny. Does that sound familiar? Did anybody hear that, say, this week?
Just a little nervous because you're telling me it's gonna get worse from where I'm at.
Middle adolescents are able to actually link their current behaviors to future consequences. Key word, they're able to. During this age, they start to imagine their own identity and their own role in the world. This is when they begin to formulate, who am I going to be when I grow up? Where do I see myself? It's interesting, counseling said that they have a hard time with students making realistic expectations and setting realistic goals. When we live in a world where a little kid, like 5 and 6 years old, can go on YouTube and play with toys and talk about how much fun it is to play with these toys and make more money than probably all of us, make more money in a year than all of us have in our bank accounts at this very moment combined. It's no wonder our students have unrealistic expectations. If that 5-year-old can do it, man, I'm 18 years old. I bet you I can have 2 million, 10 million, 20 million. I'm going to be a YouTube star. Yes?
Well, I always tell my students you gotta have marketable skills. If you don't have nothing, nobody wants to pay for it, don't matter what you think, doesn't matter.
Exactly. During the middle adolescence phase, they have a need to make their own plans. And they also see higher ethical and moral standards. They begin to recognize these. And they do this by questioning rules. Late adolescents, now they're at the age where they're starting to actually make more concrete, or they're able to make more concrete future decisions. They start thinking about career. They plan for their future role in the world. They begin to take the views that they have been formulating all throughout the early and middle stages of adolescence and start to apply those views to more global concepts. So examples of justice and equity come up. They start to apply their views to fairness, what they see as being fair and just and right. They are able to balance idealism within some boundaries of reality. And by this age, they are much more comfortable with being able to debate their ideas and their views, as well as being more comfortable with opposing authority figures. So now that we kind of understand the physical changes that are taking place, the cognitive changes that are taking place, hopefully we have a better idea of what is going on in our adolescents' heads. What does this mean for learning? What is the role of the educator? What are implications for us as teachers, instructors, models, and mentors? Well, first and foremost, when we think specifically of our students, we need to be mindful of the fact that the changes that are taking place in their brain are dramatic. These are rapid changes. They take place seemingly overnight. When we add on to the fact the environment that our students are coming out of, the experiences that they have, coupled with what's going on with the changes in their body, with the changes in their brain, it makes more sense now when Johnny thinks it's the end of the world because his flight got canceled. We also need to recognize that the changes that are taking place during adolescence impacts the student's behavior. Every one of us have been either at Job Corps or to some degree have been in an education field long enough that we see students, we see young adolescents and young adults exhibit more risky behavior. You know, we talked in earlier with Christy's lesson about how students tend to make poor decisions during this phase. They're willing to take those risks and engage in that risky behavior. Why? What's most important to them?
Showing out for other friends.
Peer interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Look at this. Emphasis on what?
Tell us, Wayne, we can't see it.
Emphasis on social rewards. Kevin hit the nail on the head. You know, they want to show out in front of their friends. They want their friends to like what they do, what they say. Who's the biggest, baddest student on the block? That's basically what they're trying to do. They're trying to, you know, flex their social muscles, so to speak. Students also act out, and we see an impact in behavior because they struggle to read and understand the emotions of others. So I'm going to pose this question to counseling and to wellness. How many times have you seen students come to you distraught because they just simply were not able to comprehend the emotion or action or whatever from their instructor? Or maybe they've come to you, common one for adolescents, she really likes me. Well, what makes you say that? Well, she just happened to, like, look at me as I was walking up the road, so I know she likes me. We had those conversations before. They're capable of reading and understanding emotions. They just don't know how to. So ultimately what happens, they struggle with it, and that affects behavior. As Job Corps staff, it is our responsibility to provide a learning environment that is engaging while encouraging our students to exercise those higher order thinking skills. We want them to be able to think critically for themselves. They now have muscles, mental muscles they have never been able to use before. So we have a responsibility and a duty to provide them with the opportunities to start working those muscles, to develop that mental fitness that they need to begin thinking critically. In other words, we need to provide them with engaging lessons, engaging discussions, and opportunities that are going to keep their brains active. If we think about the previous lesson on physical fitness, someone in a sedentary lifestyle, if all they do is just sit around, they don't exercise, they don't do anything, what begins to happen to their body?
Health issues, we get pains, aches, their stomach hurts.
Yeah. They get pains, aches. Their body starts to weaken, it starts to deteriorate. What do you think happens to the brain if it is not active? So as I said, we, especially in a classroom, in a training setting, as well as in the dorms, we need to plan instructional lessons as well as activities, learning activities that promote those critical thinking and other higher order thinking skills. We need to try to create and utilize contextual learning opportunities. Now, some may have the question, what is contextual learning? Ultimately, we see it more in vocational lessons than anywhere else. So, JD, if you want a student to learn how to smooth out a concrete pad, you're going to have them sit there with the book and they're going to read it over and over and over again, and then they've mastered it, right?
No.
What? You have to show them, and then what?
Then have them do
Have them do it. With contextual learning, you are putting it in a real world, hands-on context. So after JD shows them how to smooth out a concrete pad, he's going to put the tools in their hands, and they're going to have to get down there and do it. They're going to have to work. Now, in a math class, for example, I'm sure if anybody ever came to my class when I taught math, or Mr. Sweet's class when he teaches math, you start doing fractions, our lessons are riveting. Students are just fully paying attention to what's going on, reducing fractions, adding fractions together, multiplying them, dividing them. They absolutely love doing fractions. Is that what we experience, Steve? Absolutely. Maybe in a perfect world, absolutely, but absolutely not. Now, what is a real world example of using fractions that actually interests our students?
Great.
Tape measures.
Okay? If you put it within the context of what they need in trade, they start to make that connection. Now, again, it's not going to work out perfectly like that, because I can see, Kevin and Anthony both were back there kind of cracking up a little bit. Oh, okay. If you put the lesson in the context that they're actually going to use when they complete the program, it doesn't seem like they're just simply doing fractions anymore. It doesn't seem like they're doing the lesson anymore. They are actually engaging in an experience that they are going to use. They have the opportunity to practice. They have the opportunity to mess up in a context here that might not necessarily allow them to keep their job if they were doing it actually in the field. They have the opportunity to learn here. They're going through these changes. They have these, the capability of doing more. We need to provide them with the opportunities to exercise that, provide them with the opportunities to do more. We need to apply personal relevance to their learning by tying it to their personal interests, their prior knowledge, or even current events. You tend to get more buy-in when they start to see what's really in it for them. How can they connect it to what's going on in their life right now? They're more interested in those learning activities if they see that it's something that is going to benefit them, that it's going to interest them. So we need to think about ways that we can present assignments and assessments and activities that are going to require them to exercise those complex problem-solving skills. And we need to help them, guide them, show them how to connect that information to their own experiences. As a staff, we need to do a better job of providing our students with guided opportunities to learn, as well as develop the social and emotional skills that they need so that they can be successful on the job and out living on their own. They have the ability to regulate their emotions. They just need to learn how to. So we as staff have a tremendous opportunity to be able to help guide our students on how to regulate their emotions. So in a moment, you are going to have an opportunity to think about doing things a little bit differently than maybe you're used to. You're going to gather in 4 groups, and each group will be assigned a scenario. Considering the changes that take place during adolescence, the experiences that our students are going through, your task will be to look at that scenario and come up with the best way to create a teachable moment for that student. An opportunity for them to acquire contextual knowledge through a real-world scenario. What questions do you have? Okay. Scenario 1, based on the most recent TABE diagnostic, a student has not mastered the computation of fractions and decimals. So group 1, how do we do things a little bit differently?
So we talked about that, one related back to their trade by maybe doing like a kind of project where they have to, let's say you have project material, but we only want a quarter of that. So getting them to computate like that out, and also maybe relating it back to video games. So I talked about like, this is very, very basic, but like a pizza fraction game, that's an actual game, pizza slices. So if it's that basic, doing something like that, depending on what level where they're at with that. So bringing in some kind of board game or something like that to help them because they really like video games.
Okay. So your approach, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like 1, you're trying to connect the learning to something that they're already interested in. So with our students, most of our students don't come here for academics, they come here to learn their trade. So we could make that connection, put it within the context of their trade. I remember when most of our students were big into sports, and it seems like now they're primarily interested in, you know, video games and, the digital age, so to speak. So connecting it into, you know, something they would already be interested in with like an online game, is that kind of the approach that you all were taking? Okay. All right, what about group number 2? A student is consistently reporting to accountability several minutes late and does not see why it is such a big deal.
So our thinking with this, you know, one of the first things you can do is ask the cause for lateness. You know, what's causing you to be late? What's preventing you from getting here on time? Understanding where they're coming from a little bit before you jump on them. And then also asking them why they feel like it's not a big deal. Tell me why it's not a big deal to you. So, you know, Mr. Stacy said, oftentimes it'll be like they feel like it's on their own time. You know, they've already completed their training day and, you know, it's their time. So listening to them on what their concerns are and then asking them, well, what do you think and why do you think it's a big deal to me? You know, say it's Mr. Stacy talking, saying, well, why do you think it matters to me? And making them critically think about why it's important for them to be on time to accountability. And
Through their eyes.
through their eyes. And then you can go into some teachable moments, you know, about how it affects others whenever you're late, even if it's not at work, in other circumstances, you know, if you're late to something else in your personal life, how it can affect other people. And then what was the other example we had? Oh, yeah, and too, they know about the employability aspect and all that, but they can obviously argue that with it being on their own time. So just having a conversation, really making them critically think about why it's important.
And then also to bring in a management system, how it can ultimately affect their enrollment here if it's not corrected.
I like that.
I do too.
I like that it's more of it's really a conversation. It's not, you were wrong for being late. You're getting a write-up, you're gonna have to do 4 hours. There's no real explanation, there's no substance to that. All they're experiencing is the consequences. When they're already at an age where they're primarily oppositional. They're automatically questioning, well, why is this rule in place? This is a stupid rule, I don't get it. They're trying to get it, that's why they say they don't like it, that's why they're opposing it, that's why they're questioning it. Because it's part of that learning process for them. So, both groups 1 and 2, excellent approaches. All right, scenario number 3. A student obtained a high school diploma before enrolling in Job Corps. She feels that academics and her vocational instructor are wasting her time and holding her back by forcing her to sit in classes and completing stupid assignments that she does not need. This is new for us. We have never, ever in the history of Jacobs Creek had to deal with this type of student.
We was talking
Twice a week, 3 times.
2 or 3 times a week, and depending on the student, maybe twice in the same day. But we all related it back to stuff to go and explaining to the student how we have to do training, and we have to sit through OSHA classes, and we have to sit through special training that we have to just for our job. And then we talked about how Mr. Driver's talking about how academics would play a factor in figuring grade. And of course, JD, you know, about cubic yards and things like that, figured up a project. And all that would tie back into why they need to go to the classes. And JD also brought up the fact, hey, they didn't hide it from you. This is what you signed up for. Sometimes you gotta understand what you're signing up for and make your own decisions about that. And then I would relate back sometimes to, oh, you're grown, you don't need this, but yet you came here, you couldn't get paid any other way, or this much knowledge will get you a job, this much will get you paid. That's kinda how I do it, so.
Yeah. Give them some, I guess, some real world hard pills to swallow sometimes. You know, we wanna make sure that our students understand, you know, that contrary to popular belief, we do kinda know what we're doing. You know, that everything that they are learning here is for a specific reason and a specific purpose. And the more that we can really kind of guide them through that conversation, guide them through that thought process, the more they will take ownership of it. Because ultimately, here's the thing, when we're younger, when we're little kids, we learn by the teacher telling us what's what, we accept it at face value, and that's it. Well, the teacher said that the world is round, so that means the world is round. The teacher said that 2 + 2 = 4. You know, she showed me how if you take, you know, draw 2 lines here, 2 lines here, and you count them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, yep, that's 4. How do adolescents and ultimately adults learn? Experience. For the longest time, I'm primarily a visual learner. Every time that I personally took one of those learning type tests, visual was always my number one. Now, I still learn visually, but as I've gotten older, I need to be more hands-on. I need to experience it. I actually replaced a blend door motor on my Ford Explorer one time. I had no idea what the heck a blend door motor was. I just knew that's what I needed. I found a video on YouTube, step-by-step instructions showing me exactly how to pull the center console out, how to get in there, get to the blend door motor, how to take it off, how to put the new one on. I am not an ASE certified mechanic. I just knew the tools that I needed. I watched somebody else do it, and then I would play the video, pause it, do what they did. Play the video, pause it, do what they did. I learn through watching, coaching, and experience. Most adults, that's how we learn best. Adolescents, that's when they transition out of, this is how things work in the real world, because so-and-so said so, to questioning everything and starting to experience how things work in the real world. So our students are in that phase. They need to be hands-on. Now, does that mean they don't have to do any book work? So really with this second one, and I love some of the things that Group 3 pointed out, you know, making the connections to stuff that they have to do in trade. If we want them to understand why they're going to have to do the book work, that's not saying they're just sitting in the classroom, all they're doing is the book work, and now they're an expert on grading. No, they need to understand the concepts and then get out there, talk through those concepts while they're actually doing it. And then they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. It's very good. All right, scenario 4. I know I'm going way over and I apologize. A student is frustrated and angry at 2 other students who were assigned cleanup duty and they are goofing off, leaving him to do most of the cleaning. As a result, he yells at them as he storms away from the assignment. Never have seen that happen in the dorms, have we, Brian?
Nope.
Except on days that end in Y. All right, so group 4.
We talked about the student that was angry that stormed out, asking him to think about his behavior, think about why he reacted the way he did, see if there was something different he could do. Maybe he could talk with the students that are goofing off, make sure that they understand what they're supposed to do. Use the fact that, you know, in a job, you can't just storm off all the time, like if something needs to get done. You know, use that as a learning opportunity for the student to understand that, you know, when you work at a certain job, you can't pick your coworkers or your boss, and so you have to learn how to get along and get things done. So we discussed the student, possibly maybe if he talks with the students and they don't want to help, like maybe give him opportunity to use his leadership skills, and maybe he could assign other students that he feels are more responsible, that are willing to get the task done. And that was basically what we talked about. That's about something.
All right. Very good. So give yourselves a round of applause. Excellent work. So before we close out, I just want to leave you all with some tips for success. We need to try to do things a little bit differently. Give our students time to grow, because many of our students are still going through adolescent development. Give them the opportunities that they need to develop those skills, to exercise those new neural pathways that have formed. Let's strengthen those mental muscles. Allow them opportunities to think for themselves and to work through problems with guidance. Before we can do any of this, we need to first make sure that we're taking the time to actually get to know our students. When is the last time that you sat down with a student and just talked to them? Not about Job Corps, not about behavior, but just actually had a conversation like you're sitting there in a coffee shop getting to know someone. Take the time to learn their interests. What motivates them? What are their goals? If we really start out with those things as we work with the student, then we can start to identify what they're really good at. What are their strengths? And then what are those areas where maybe they need a little bit more development? By doing this and actually just taking the time to talk to them and get to know them, what you are doing is you're showing genuine interest. And you're showing them that you value who they are personally. With the rapid changes taking place in their lives, and it's very crucial during those first really 90 days that they're here. Especially at the very beginning, because a lot of them come in, they've never been somewhere like this before. It's a new environment for them. In a lot of cases, they're out of their comfort zone. Take the time to get to know them. Academic educators, instructors, we need to ditch the what is on the test mentality. How often have we focused primarily on what's their assessment and making sure that they know what the assessment is? I'm glad Steve and I are the only licensed teachers in here at the moment, because if you really want to get a group of teachers fired up, just utter the words "no child left behind." No Child Left Behind put emphasis on test scores. But ultimately, what did it do?
Give them a free pass,
Just
just about.
about. And it left a lot of kids behind. Because what we did is we told them that their value and their worth and their intelligence is based on a test score. I can look back and honestly, some of the most intelligent people that I've ever met in my life never even darkened the door of a college. Most of them were solid D students or dropouts. They didn't test well. But by golly, they could take an entire engine apart and put it back together blindfolded with one hand tied behind their back. Intelligence, ability has nothing to do with test scores. Now, I understand that due to Department of Labor requirements, our students do need to be at a certain level. What I'm saying is I think we need to focus less on the score and more on the skill. The score may or may not come. But how many of our students have we worked with and helped get to a specific score or a specific percentage, and then when they leave the program, they didn't last very long on the job? But yet we have others who struggled academically that went out, got jobs in their field, became very, very successful. True Job Corps success stories. Help them get the skills that they need so that they can have success. All right, these next two, I'm going to ask you right now, don't throw any shoes at me or any heavy blunt objects. Because believe me, I had a hard time typing these out when I was preparing the lessons. Let them say no and ask why. It's okay for them to say no to something. It's okay for them to ask why. It's not that they're necessarily trying to be oppositional. That's not the end game. It may seem that way, but it's not. Questioning authority actually helps them understand the way that things work. That's how they begin to understand the purpose of rules. Not only that, but critical thinking means that someone should be able to make an effective argument for something. So if a student says no or asks why or wants to know why things are that way, they're actually building effective skills to make solid arguments. Let them test boundaries. Now, before anybody starts going up in arms with the torches and the pitchforks, let them test boundaries within reason. Now, here at the center, we have certain boundaries, certain rules, certain guidelines that are in place for safety. Now, are we being effective educators? Are we being good stewards with our students if we are not holding them accountable to those safety boundaries. But if a student starts questioning why they can't cross rooms, why they can't room visit, or they start testing those boundaries, there's a reason that they're doing that. It is part of their development. Now, we had that situation. We had students come in and state the case. They didn't understand why that rule was in place. As a management team, we took that into consideration and said, you know what? Yeah, that rule really doesn't make sense. Let's go ahead and end it. Now, are there still boundaries and guidelines? Mr. Stacy?
There is.
Yeah. But it's not a hard, no, you cannot do it boundary. They need to be able to test those boundaries. And we need to allow them to do it because that is the opportunity for us to identify those teachable moments. We need to help students understand the purpose of rules and limits. And then let them solve problems. Oftentimes, a student comes to us with a problem or with an issue, and the way that I grew up, if I went to an authority figure with a problem, ultimately what I got was a lecture on why I was wrong. Anybody else grow up like that? When we lecture, we're actually stifling their ability to solve their own problems. They need that for brain development. So rather than lecture, we need to be a facilitator. We need to facilitate their thought processes to help them actually develop their own solution to the problem. I know from talking with counselors in the past, I know from talking with Tracy, when I've gone for guidance on working with a particular student, ultimately at the end of the day, we really shouldn't be telling the students what to do and how to do it. We need to be asking them, well, why do you think that it needs to be done that way? Think about their thought processes. Let them work through it because they are the ones who ultimately need to solve their own problem. So as we get ready to kick off the new year when our students get back, let's make a better effort to allow our students the opportunity to grow and develop. If we are going to be a successful job training program that puts our emphasis on the students, puts the focus on the student needs, then we need to give them the opportunities to learn, to grow, and to strengthen those cognitive skills that are developing while they're here. Now, does that mean that we need to cease holding students accountable? Absolutely not. Because part of them learning is that there are rules and there are guidelines that are here for a reason. Well, let's help them understand why. we can do that as a team, if we can all be on the same page with that, there is no doubt in my mind that we could have the absolute best student culture and job corps. We will see more success, more student success as a center. And we will see long-lasting change. Maybe not in everybody. I'm a realist, and I understand that there are some students that no matter how much you work with them, at the end of the day, we're not going to get through them. That's not being negative, that's just being realistic. But the ones that we can help, I guarantee we will see long-lasting life change.